Hi Year 2 and welcome to our next RE lesson this term. So today we're going to be thinking about stories of the Prophet that Muslims love to tell. So before we get started, just a reminder that if you want to pause the video as you go through, that's absolutely fine. It might be that you need more time to help with a task or to answer a question or to find out a bit more information. I'd then suggest that you carry on watching the video until the end. And then once you've watched it once, you can go back and fast forward or rewind any of the bits. So let's get started by thinking about how we can be successful in our learning today. So the first thing is that you can retell a story about the Prophet Muhammad. You can say why Muslims try to follow the Prophet Muhammad and have a great respect for him. And finally, you can explain how stories of the Prophet show Muslims how to live. So let's start as we always do with our knowing more, remembering more. So this is a true or false set of questions. So you can just write down or say if you think these following statements are true or false. The Prophet Muhammad has over 1.5 billion followers who respect him all over the world. True or false? What do you think? Second one. People have followed his teachings for over 1,400 years. Is that true or false? What do you think? Third one. The Muslims' holy book is called the Quran. True or false? So, are you ready for the answers? If you're not yet, this might be a good time to pause it. Here we go. True. There are over 1.5 billion followers who respect the Prophet. True, they have been following his teachings for over 1,400 years. And again, it's true that the holy book for the Muslims, is called the Quran. Well done if you got 3 out of 3 correct. If you didn't, you might want to fix your answer if you've written it down to correct it next to it, so that might help you in your learning next time. Just a reminder as well as we go through the lesson that it's really helpful if you say your answers when I ask you to say them, because that helps us remember our learning and to answer questions by saying them out loud. So here is our knowledge organizer. And if we think about our couple of lessons, we have done what people think about God. We have thought about who the Prophet Muhammad was. So now we're moving on to question 3, about stories of the Prophet Muhammad. And also in our last lesson, we looked at Islam being the second largest religion with 1.8 billion followers, which is nearly a quarter, 25% of the world's population. So we looked at that last week. That was one of our key ideas. But we've also looked at the mosque and the Islam religion. So today we're going to be thinking here about the Prophet Muhammad, and we'll be thinking about Allah. And Allah, as you can see here, is the name for Muslims' God. Just a reminder at this point that when we are doing if we do any drawing, that we do not draw Allah. Okay, it's really important in Muslim religion that we don't draw him as a person. So let's get started with today's lesson. So this is a question for you to be thinking about. Again, say your answers to me as if we were live in the classroom, or if you want to write them down. Who or what does Allah love the most? So you can see lots of things on here. Do you think that Allah loves the cat the most? Maybe Allah loves people the most. Maybe it's the tigers, or maybe it's cats and tigers because they're from the same family of animals. Maybe it's insects like ants. Or is it dogs because that dog looks pretty cute? This might be a good time to pause the video while you have a think and talk about it. I'm going to show you the answer now. So the answer is, it was a bit of a trick question really, that he loves all of them equally. It doesn't matter whether it's an insect or a camel or a person. Allah loves them all equally. And we know from our maths learning that the word equally is the same. So it's the same love. Okay, so let's go back over our key vocabulary that you know. Again, we'll do my turn, your turn. So when it's your turn, please say them. So my turn, your turn. Leader, Good, well done. PBUH. Good, and remember that means the one that's underneath it. Peace be upon him. Good, well done if you said all three of those back to me. So keywords we're going to meet today: mosque, muezzin, and slave. Superstars, well done for saying those back to me as well. So we're going to start our lesson today by thinking about a couple of stories from the Prophet. Now, there is a theme in these stories. There is something that happens in all of them that's the same. I wonder if you can work it out. Okay, here we go with the video.
Of the world. Islam, the religion of Muslims. Islam is the second biggest religion in the world. It began almost 1,500 years ago. The Arabic word for God is Allah, and this is what many Muslims call God. This is Amina. She is 11 years old. She lives in Glasgow with her parents and her younger brother Rahib. Amina and her family are Muslims, which means they follow the religion of Islam. Amina's family keep a copy of the Quran, the Muslim holy book, at home, and Amina loves to sit down and read it. Her dad explained that it was the word of Allah that was spoken to the Prophet Muhammad by an angel. These words were written down later by the Prophet's friends. As well as the stories and scriptures in the Quran, there are also other stories in Islam about the Prophet. Amina loves telling stories about the Prophet to her brother Rahib. One of her favorites is the Islamic story of the Prophet and the ants. One day, as the sun went down, all of the ants were returning home after a very busy day collecting food for their nest. They were looking forward to a good night's rest. Suddenly, they saw big clouds of smoke drifting closer and closer to their nest, and the air was getting hotter and hotter. There was a fire! All the ants began to run as fast as their little legs could carry them, so they could get out of the way of the fire and smoke. They heard a voice from above saying, "Look what you have done! You've built your fire too close to the ants' nest. The poor little creatures will get burnt." It was the voice of the Prophet. He was camping near to the ants' nest with some of his followers who had lit the fire. As soon as the Prophet had spoken, the fire was put out. The ants were saved. The Prophet said to his followers, "No matter how small or large the animals are, they are all important to God. Everyone should take care of them." The ants all hurried back to the nest and went to bed. They felt safe because they knew that the Prophet was looking out for them. And that is the story of the Prophet and the ants, said Amina. Rahib giggled and said, "Can you tell me another one, please?" Amina smiled and started to tell another story. The Islamic story of the crying camel. It was a really hot day, so hot that everyone in the town was sheltering in the shade. The Prophet was walking through a garden when it sounded like someone was crying. There was a poor, overworked camel tied up to a tree with no shade. The hot sun was beating down on the camel, and he had nothing to drink. The camel's owner was resting nearby in the shade. The Prophet walked over and said to him, "Your camel is just as much a part of God's world as you or I. It is our duty to treat the camel well, to feed it, and to make sure that it has enough to drink." The owner looked very ashamed and promised to take care of the camel properly from now on. Amina smiled at Rahib and said, "It's really important we care for all of Allah's creatures equally." Rahib nodded and asked, "Can you tell me another story?" "Not tonight," said Amina. "It's time for bed." Rahib hurried to bed, excited to hear what stories Amina would tell him tomorrow.
Okay, so we've just seen two stories about the Prophet and the ants and the crying camel. What did both of those stories have in common? What did the Prophet do in both of the stories that was the same? Again, you might want to pause the video or always go back and rewatch that video if you need to. You can see the website address is down here at the bottom if you need to click on that as well. So if you were thinking that what was the same in the video was that the prophet was looking after and making sure that the ants in the first one were treated just as equally as the humans, you would be correct. He didn't want them to burn in the fire or get too hot, so he made the humans put the fire out. And again, the same with the camel. The camel wasn't being treated as equal or as fair to the humans. So we're getting a bit of a message from the prophet that actually there might be something about treating everybody the same, which when we think about when we started the lesson and we had all of the creatures on here. Oh, look, I can see an ant and a camel. That we are getting the message that all creatures are treated the same. So I'm going to read you a story now about a person called Bilal, and he was the first muezzin. Now, muezzin is one of our key words for today. So my turn, your turn, muezzin. Perfect, well done. So have a listen. Again, if you need to pause it, the words are going to come up on the screen so you can follow as we go. So Bilal was a black slave, and he had to obey his master in everything. He was ordered one day to strike a Muslim preacher who had suggested that Bilal and his master were equals. Ooh. So Bilal, who was a slave, which means that he's not going to be equal, he had to do lots and lots of things. He had to obey everything his master said. He was told by his master, the person that owned him, that he had to strike a Muslim preacher, someone who was talking the words of Islam. Because this preacher said that Bilal and his master were equal. All people are equal as the teeth of a comb, said the preacher. All people, all colours, all races are equal in the sight of Allah. Bilal listened to the preacher and was so convinced by what he said that he refused to whip him. Now, as you can imagine, Bilal's master was angry at this disobedience when he didn't follow the rules from his slave, and he punished him horribly and painfully. So just because Bilal thought that the preacher was being convincing and was speaking the truth about everybody being equal and didn't follow his master's orders, he was punished really, really badly. Now, Bilal's shouts of pain from his punishment attracted the attention of a person called Abu Bakr, and he was one of Muhammad's closest companions. Now, he bought Bilal from the master, so he, instead of the other master owning him, now Abu Bakr bought him as a slave, and he and the other Muslims, including the Prophet himself, nursed Bilal back to health. I wonder why Abu Bakr bought Bilal from the other master. Why did he do that? Why would somebody who is a Muslim, if they believe everybody is equal, buy a slave? Keep thinking. Later, Muhammad and the other Muslims, including Bilal, fled to the city of Medina, where they built the first mosque. When the mosque was finished, many of the Muslims wondered what they could use to call people to prayer. So when you're calling people to prayer, it's reminding them to come to prayer. Perhaps they could use a flag, so they could wave it at them to remind them when they see it that it's time to come in and to pray. Could use a bell. So when you ring the bell and you hear the bell, that you know that it's your reminder, a bit like an alarm clock, that you need to come and pray. Could use a drum or a trumpet. What do you think they should use to remind people to come to pray? The prophet was silent as each suggestion was made and discussed. Then one man said that in a dream he had heard a human voice calling people to prayer. Muhammad, the prophet, turned to his friend Bilal, and yours, Bilal, is the voice we will use. Bilal, the black slave, had become the first muezzin, the voice that calls people to prayer. So well done for thinking and reading and following that story so well. So I want you to think now, why did the prophet choose Bilal, who was the slave, to become the first muezzin, to call people to prayer? Why didn't he choose anybody else? Or why didn't he choose a flag, a bell, or a drum? Okay, well done for thinking and sharing your answers there. I think that Bilal was chosen because he was seen as unequal. Because Bilal was seen as a slave and was somebody who was owned and had to do exactly what he was told by his master, as it says up here at the start of the story, that's a really good sign for the prophet to show that actually in Islam, we believe that everybody is equal, that a slave and a master are equal, animals and humans are equal, and that's why Bilal became the first muezzin, the first voice that calls people to prayer, to show that everybody really is equal. So, just like Muslims believe that everybody is equal and all living things are equal, Muslims also believe that faith, your beliefs, can light the path in the dark, just like the moon. And you can see on the right hand side here, you have got a picture of a crescent moon. Crescent moon is the one that is this not semicircle shape, this shape here, that's a crescent moon. And that it's because that the moon gives us lights that even when it's dark outside, even at night time, there is still a moon, some light that is showing us the way. Now, Muslims also believe, as we've learned today, that you should be fair and kind to humans, animals, and all living creatures. So those are two strong beliefs in that Muslims believe in the Islamic religion. So just to recap, answer these questions, you can call them out loud. What is a muezzin? Why do you think that the first muezzin was a slave is important? What does the story of the ant tell us about the Islamic faith? What does the crescent moon signify? What does it mean to Muslims? And true or false, Muslims believe you should be fair and kind to humans, animals, and all living creatures. Okay, you might want to pause the screen here before I show you the answers. So a muezzin is the man with the voice that calls people to prayer. And if you said that Bilal, the slave, was the first muezzin, bonus points for that. Why is it important that he was a slave, the first muezzin? It says, as we talked about earlier, it shows that in Islam, everyone is considered equal or the same. And what does the story of the ant tell us? The story of the ant shows that all of Allah's creations should be treated with kindness, absolutely. So treated the same, treated fairly, and that we should show kindness to everybody. And what does the crescent moon signify? So the crescent moon, or the moon, shows or signifies that faith can light the path in the dark, just like the moon does at night time. And that one was true at the end, that Muslims believe you should be fair and kind to all living creatures. So well done if you got 4 out of 4 correct. Be very impressed, shows me you've been listening really well. So your turn now to do some independent learning because I've been talking at you for far too long. So you can do this on Purple Mash, and I'm sure there's a sheet ready for you that your teachers have prepared, or you can do it on a piece of paper. And then if you want to, you can send a picture of that onto Purple Mash. So we'd like you in the middle to draw the crescent moon and the star shape. So that's the reminder about the faith and their light, lighting up the dark. So on one side of the moon, write about what you think the stories of the prophet teach Muslims. So what stories did we learn about today? Can you remember? It's one with an insect. There's one with an animal that had some humps. And there was one about a slave. So can you remember the stories? Good, well done. If you remembered that there was the ant, the prophet and the ant, the one about the camel, and then Bilal, the first muezzin. So on this side, write about what these stories teach Muslims to be, how they should treat everything and everybody. And on the other side, you can draw a picture of someone showing how the Prophet inspires Muslims to behave. So show some good or kind behavior. Now, reminder, and it says here, look, please do not draw the Prophet. Okay, it's really important that we don't draw the Prophet in Islam. So what picture could you draw to show some behavior that you think is good? Could be something you do at home, could be something you do in school. So that's where I'm going to leave you today, year 2, to finish off your learning. And I can't wait to see some of these on Purple Mash or shared possibly in your learning through the week.